Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the brief delay. This is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. It's 9:03 a.m. and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers
Beach LBA.
Okay.
Move your phone to this side and put it closer.
Okay, we'll start that over. Good morning, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency. It is 9:03 a.m., Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. If you would please, let's see, all members are present of the local planning agency. If you would please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I printed out this. We're meeting here today to conduct matters of business for our town. Let our hearts and minds be open to the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. May we have the foresight to build a future for our neighbors, families, and visitors that embodies the values we all possess and reflects the vision of our community. Amen.
Amen.
The first item on the agenda is an approval of the minutes for September 12th, 2023. If I could have a motion to approve the minutes as they're distributed or with any corrections.
So moved, Sudduth.
Seconded.
So there's a motion by Don and seconded by Jane. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. The next item is public comment. And I am going to turn public comment over to Jane for a moment because I've got to go do something. So I'll be
Okay.
right back.
Anyone wish to make a public comment before the meeting? You will have a chance at the end of the meeting, but if you want to make something, if you're not going to speak on any of the cases, you could come up now. Anybody? Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. We'll go to the first public hearing. Resolution 23-125, variance 202-30175-5137, Estero Boulevard. Approve with conditions, deny variance 202-30175 to allow a garage closer to Estero Boulevard street right-of-way line than the principal building for the property located at 5137 Estero Boulevard. Okay,
Members of the planning board, this item is quasi-judicial in nature. And if I may, I'd like to just make a few comments regarding quasi-judicial proceedings. So zoning revisions, special exceptions, and variances are all quasi-judicial in nature, which requires our public hearing to comply with procedural requirements established in Florida law and in our land development code. So quasi-judicial proceedings are less formal than proceedings before a circuit court, but they are more formal than the remainder of our meeting, and they follow the basic standards of due process, which requires notice, application of the correct standards and decisions that is based on competent and substantial evidence presented to the LPA this morning in written documents or in oral testimony. So once this is presented, the LPA will evaluate the testimony and the information for each item and then draw a conclusion regarding whether the criteria in the Land Development Code or state law, as may be applicable, has been satisfied. So pure speculation or mere opinion that is not based on competent facts cannot legally be considered by the local planning agency in evaluating an agenda item. So testimony by professionals who are qualified as experts in a particular area is considered competent evidence by Florida courts, as well as testimony by neighbors and residents who have fact-based information such as minutes, surveys, engineering reports, or testimony based on personal information, things that they have witnessed themselves. If you intend to speak, please keep this in mind. When you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record whether or not you've been sworn in, and your qualifications or interest in this matter.
Okay, has anyone from the LPA had any ex parte communication on this case?
No ex parte.
Yes, I have. I've spoken to the applicants. I've been to their house, looked at the site. I've also talked to their consultant.
No ex parte.
I've been to the site and know the property well.
No ex parte.
I know the property well.
Okay, so, okay,
Madam Vice Chair, is there anyone who has a conflict of interest
no.
regarding this matter? And if we can swear in the witnesses, anyone who wishes to provide testimony on this matter, if they would stand and raise their right hand. Okay, do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're going to present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, you may start.
Okay. Good morning. Sarah Probst with Community Development. The property owners for 5137 Estero Boulevard are requesting a variance to allow an accessory structure closer to the right-of-way property line than the primary structure. Section 341174B prohibits accessory structures closer to the right-of-way than principal structures. Property is zoned residential single-family and is in the low-density future land use district. Prior to the Hurricane Ian, the property contained a single-family residence and a garage. That garage was closer to the right-of-way than the principal structure. The home did not survive Ian, but the garage did. The applicant would like to build a new single-family residence behind the garage in a similar location to where the previous residence was. The garage is located 43 feet from the Estero Boulevard right-of-way property line. The property is approximately 200 feet deep by 75 feet wide, and there is approximately 30 feet between the existing garage and the opposite side setback. The applicant is here, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. So the garage had permits, everything was fine when it was built, and it didn't have to go through a variance to get built.
As far as I'm aware, we had nothing in the records that would indicate such.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Any questions for Sarah? All right. The applicant may come up.
Good morning, Kara Stewart. I'm here representing the owners, Amy and Rick Lowry, for 5137 Estero Boulevard. As staff has mentioned, we have made application to allow our accessory structure to remain. We would like to point out in the location that we are proposing the new single family, we are enabling ourselves to maintain a 7.5-foot side setback on one side and a wider setback on the other. We will be 15 feet away from the side property line. We have also selected to put the location of the home behind the existing accessory structure for multiple reasons, being on Estero Boulevard. One being noise, some added safety, some dirt, just privacy along that Estero Boulevard corridor. The structure itself, if we had located one adjacent to the garage, as staff has mentioned, would have given us approximately a 60-foot wide structure between the garage and the new proposed structure. Setting it back, we feel, gives us a little bit more depth to the property. The owners are here if you have any questions, and I'm available to answer anything.
Thank you, Kara. Are there any
Hang on a
questions?
second. You need to say whether you had any ex parte or anything.
Oh, I have not had any ex parte other than watching Rick on the roof for several days. So none other.
And no interest.
Conflicts.
Yeah.
And I have no conflicts
There you go. All right.
in this particular case, but in a general rule. I have
Lots of conflicts.
Okay. Any questions for staff on this?
Nope.
None. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
Staff already make
Yeah.
their presentation?
Mhm.
Why don't you just keep going with this hearing
Yeah.
since you, oh, did you say oh no? Okay, Amy, Rick, you don't want to make any comments? Okay, thank you.
Any public?
So we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to address this? Seeing none, the public comment is closed. So we'll move it back to the council, to the LPA. Is there any discussion on this? Dawn?
No comments.
Anyone? Patrick? Doug?
Nope.
Jane?
Well, I feel that the structure was built,
Microphone in.
the structure was built without any variances, and I feel that it is important to get people back into their homes, and the depth of the lot is an advantage to the owners because they're already 43 feet back from the street, and to make them tear this down is just a absolute burden and seems ridiculous to me. So I see it as something that we should approve.
Okay. Jim, do you have any comments on this?
No comment.
And how about you, Scott?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I do not have any comments. I'll vote to approve this measure. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion,
I'll make-
including the findings and conclusions? Why are you laughing, Don?
Because I won't remember them.
Well, I can't pull up the
Hang
darn
on.
thing here yet.
Hang on, I got it.
I'll make a motion to approve variance 202-30175-5137 Estero Boulevard. I feel it meets the findings and conclusions, and there is a condition for approval. Let's see, wait a minute, we didn't talk about that. Approval is not good. Including the condition for approval.
Is there a second for Jane's motion?
Second, Seth.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Jane, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Don?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Anita is yes. Jim?
Aye.
And Scott?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you all very much. The next item on the, Jane, did you swear everybody in for anything that we're talking about?
No, just that hearing.
Just that hearing. Okay, so the next hearing is actually not quasi-judicial in nature, but legislative. It is CPA 2022-0084. It's a small-scale map amendment for the 21471 Widgeon Terrace and adjacent common element of Flamingo Harbor condominium. Just so people know, a small-scale map amendment is an amendment to the comprehensive plan. It's just called a small-scale map amendment. It sounds innocuous, but it's a change to the comprehensive plan. Nancy,
So
go ahead.
It is legislative in nature, as our chair has pointed out. And for that reason, approval of this type of land use request is by ordinance. So I am going to go ahead and just read the title into the ordinance so everyone is clear.
Thank you, Nancy.
This is ordinance 23-16, an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending town of Fort Myers Beach adopted future land use map dated January 1st, 1999, for a portion of the property located at 21471 Wigden Terrace and part of the adjacent common element property of Flamingo Harbor Condominium, Fort Myers Beach, providing for clarifications as necessary, providing for conflicts of law, scrivener's error, severability, and providing an effective date. And so the LPA will be making a recommendation to the town council for approval of the ordinance.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Jason?
Good morning, Jason Green, Community Development. Yes, as you said before you, is a small-scale map amendment that's generally 50 acres or less by statute. And so what this
Did you
is,
say 50 or 15 acres?
50.
50.
yeah, it
50
used to be
acres or less.
10, and then it was 20, then it's 50. Yeah, it's gotten bigger. But small. So this is truly small scale. It's a small piece of property. Essentially, we've kind of gone through this with the applicant for a couple of years trying to get this right, and I think to your point, there hasn't been a lot of these done in the town. There's a provision in the comprehensive plan that talks about amendments to the map where there's errors. Unfortunately, that provision is about 20 years old, so it's not like, it was originally drafted as a way to, if you adopted the map and then we found an error, a line was in the wrong place, you could fix it. 20 years later, it's not really a provision, and you definitely can't do it administratively. So that's why we're here before you, and we'll be before the council for this small-scale map amendment. The applicant has provided some environmental studies. Essentially, it was mapped as wetlands, a portion of the rear yard where they want to put a pool. And so then, based on that environmental studies, are requesting an amendment to that boundary with moving the wetland line to match where the wetland is in their rear yard, according to their environmental study. And as you mentioned, the property is at 21471 Widgeon Terrace, and that's essentially the request, just to move that line.
And Jason, does staff have a recommendation on this?
Yeah, based on the environmental information, they'll have to go through DEP, and some other agencies will get noticed with a small scale, and they'll have an opportunity to pursue an appeal of that if they disagree with that wetland finding. But that's why they had an environmental specialist do that, to take care of that part of it and determine soils and vegetation and that type of thing. So based on that information, we would recommend approval based on the environmental study.
Thank you very
If
much.
it's found to be inaccurate, then obviously that would be a different situation.
Okay. Are there any questions for Jason?
Is this basically the same request that was done in 2001?
So with this property,
Yeah.
I don't believe so. I think there was, if I remember the history on this, there was discussions about doing that, and there's a history of I think it was DEP that was investigating if vegetation had been removed and wetlands were impacted, and that had kind of been sitting there in their records for a long time, and then so they've redone the environmental study in the last, I think it was 16 months or whatever it was, 18 months, and that's where they've determined that it was not wetlands. And based on their investigation, the soils even underneath, I mean, you can clear a site of wetlands, put new sod over it, and pretend it wasn't wetlands, but they've done soil borings and determined the soils were not wetland supportive. So, so I don't know if the history on that was, I think they were going to do one. There was a discussion about administratively adjusting the line, and that never got done.
Okay.
And it was a different owner. I'm aware
Yeah,
of
the
that.
2001
property.
case
Yep.
that's
Right.
referred to is a different owner.
Correct.
Okay.
So this clears, in theory, clears all that up.
Okay.
Yes, I want to just make sure I understand what's happening. There's a wetland boundary historically, and from the older aerials that they attached to this documents, that was at least treed, I mean.
Correct.
And, but now, there's a yard there. And the more obvious boundary is the riprap boundary, right?
So that speaks to our original concern when we started looking at the history of the aerials and looking back
Yeah.
several years. It looks very vegetated, and it's
Yeah.
hard to tell from those aerials. And that's why then we also found the DEP investigation and questions about the lot clearing, and that's why we asked them to provide an environmental assessment. And so they have
Because,
a professional that makes that,
From the
assessment.
aerials, it appears the adjacent properties more or less retain the original wetland boundary. They hadn't cleared their front yards.
So I want to be careful about saying wetland boundary because not knowing where that boundary of wetlands are. So we have two things working here. We have on-the-ground wetlands, which can change and
Right,
fluctuate
correct.
over time. And we have a map that mapped property wetlands
Yeah.
without the benefit of a jurisdictional boundary, right? So when they colored the maps originally, they drew this line, probably using tree lines.
Yeah.
With the opportunity of, if it's incorrect or you have other data, then you shift that line, and that's where we're at today.
Okay.
Now, whether there were wetlands impacted, it appears there weren't based on their environmental. That's the best data that we
That's
have.
history.
Yeah. So, well, that's today, right? That's today. Again, they did soil borings according to their report.
Yeah,
and they
you
dug
said-
down and said that that's not soil that would have been wetlands
Wetland
before.
soil.
Right.
The other question I have is just my understanding of the property boundaries. Because there seems to be and I just maybe don't understand this, there's the property boundary, but then does the property go all the way to the Estero Bay?
So no, the property under the association does. So
Oh, okay.
according to their plat, they platted smaller lots and then common area. And the common area, according to their deed documents, apparently they have permission to ask for use of that property.
Oh, I
And
see.
I believe in the packet, there's the permission to apply and use that.
Yeah,
Which
because
is, it's a strange, it's
The
different than
pool straddles their property line.
Right, so they have permission apparently from their association board to have the pool go into common property. And this has a little kind of a jut out area right behind it. It sticks out a little bit more than other areas, so it kind of gives them more room.
Yeah, I see.
So
Okay.
the legal description for the change is supposed to cover that and allow for the setbacks and all of that to be accommodated within the new future land use category.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, we really wanted just the legal description of what was the minimum amount needed to be changed from the wetland to the mixed residential.
Understood.
Any other questions for Jason? Thank you, Jason.
I got one
Jane,
more
go
question. On page, I don't know what page this is, 116. The blue line that is that is
Can you
the
all hear
property-
Jane?
That is the property line. And so is the pool going to extend past the blue into the association area? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And the underlying zoning doesn't match the future land use map, right? So you've got wetland and mixed residential, and that boundary, there's RC zoning underneath the wetland. Again, back then during mapping, it wasn't as accurate, so I would argue that they didn't have a legal description for the wetland boundary, so to speak.
Okay.
So we're kind of in a fuzzy area here with where that line exactly is, and that's why they've done an effort of writing, because when you do a map change, you also have to have a legal description of what you're changing. So they've created that legal description based on the survey of their property, the area they want to use, where the wetland line was determined based on their environmental study, and then created a legal description so that we can meet the standards of state law of changing that map. But yes, that's why it includes portions that go beyond that line.
Anything else, Jane?
No.
Anything from anyone for Jason? Thank you, Jason, very much.
And just so you know the difference between, I think you talked about small scale and large scale, it's your recommendation, then it goes to council for 2 meetings for adoption for an ordinance, and then it goes off to the state as we did this, versus if you do a large scale or a text amendment, such as the comp plan update, that is a transmittal to the state. They have a review period, and then it comes back for an adoption. So that's the difference with the small and large. Just once this is adopted, it just goes off and we give them 30 days to appeal something, but it's not really a review and comment period.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jason. Sarah, are you here for this case? Good morning. Nice to see you, Sarah.
Good morning. Sarah Spector with Retzel and Andrus. I'll be playing the part of Beverly Grady today.
Ooh, that's a big part.
It is a big, so I'm just playing the part today. So as you can tell, and as Jason had mentioned, this has been in the works for a couple years now. Part of what we have done, not only have we worked with Hans Wilson to make a determination regarding the status of the property, but Hans did go to the Department of Environmental Protection and did get an exemption letter with regard to the fill. And then we have a subsequent follow-up from DEP stating that they made that determination based on the fact that there are no wetlands on the site. So
There are no what?
wetlands
There are
on
no
the site.
wetlands on the site.
And arguably, had wetlands been on the site at the time of the map creation, it would have been identified as environmentally critical, and the zoning category would have been environmentally critical, but it was left as wetlands, with the uplands being residential. So our request here today, as Jason laid out, is to change the map designation to mixed residential so that we can improve the property. As Jason did explain very well, this property, even though it's developed as a single-family residential development, was submitted to the condominium form of ownership. So each individual owns the use rights to their lot, to the lot line, and then after the lot line, between the lot line and the bay, is limited common elements. So while they're limited common elements that are controlled by the association, the adjacent owner is the only owner that has the right to use that area. So they have gotten approval from the association to use that area for an improvement, being the pool. And we're here before you today to close the loop on that and hopefully get approval for the map change.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Ms. Spector?
There isn't a place, I realize that we're dealing with the common elements here, but I'm just curious, there isn't any placement of the pool on any of these pictures as to where it's going to be. I'm just curious, they're not going to be removing any other trees or things like that to put in this pool, right?
No, if you were looking at an aerial, you can see that the limited common elements in that area are cleared as well. It will straddle the line, but only in the cleared area, so it will only be located within the cleared area.
There is a drawing, Jane, a sketch that shows it.
How did I miss it?
Yeah, I believe it's on the survey.
Yeah.
Okay.
You show it.
What page is that?
It's tight to the house. It's tight
Page
to the
118 shows it, for example.
Okay. There's a lot of pictures on this one.
Yeah,
It's very thorough.
it is thorough.
That's very good.
Very thorough. That's Beverly Grady for you. Okay, any other questions for Sarah? Thank you very much, Sarah, appreciate it. You have anybody else here who's going to want to speak on this? This is public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this case? Seeing none, thank you all very much. The public comment is closed. LPA members, is there any further discussion on this? It's such an interesting development, Widgeon Terrace. It's just unlike anything else on the island. It's very interesting. Are you laughing because you live there, Jim? No. Okay.
Okay, I see now. Okay.
You see it, Jane?
Yeah, finally. Okay, I've got it.
All right, so this is legislative in nature, so simply takes a motion to send to council our recommendation. Is there a motion?
Sudeth, I'll move to.
Second.
So there's a motion to approve this, seconded by Dawn, seconded by Patrick.
Yep.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the administrative agenda, which is approval of rezoning town property for the fire district, land swap. Sarah?
This has been pulled from the agenda. There was not adequate notice.
Was not adequate notice. Scott, is that why you're here today? Okay. All right, so that's been pulled from the agenda. In that case, we're to LPA members' items and reports. Scott, do you have anything?
I do not.
How about you, Jim?
I do not.
Jane?
Nothing.
Doug?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Patrick?
Nothing.
And
Amazing.
Don? Patrick, nothing?
I know, that's what I said. Amazing.
Nothing,
Dawn,
thank you.
Nothing? I have nothing as well. Oh, this is flying by. Okay.
Excuse me. We realized that new members were appointed, and we may need to go through the process of appointing a new chair and vice chair.
Oh,
I hadn't thought about that.
okay.
Yeah, we should have hit that at the beginning, and
It's
And
on the
it's-
agenda.
I didn't even think
Yeah.
about it because it's all us. Well, we can certainly do that. So we'll just, maybe we'll do that under the attorney's items and reports, and the attorney could lead us through that. How do you feel about that, Nancy?
I'm fine, all in a day's work.
Yeah.
So basically, as Sarah has advised, that there is a point in time where bodies such as the LPA need to take some formal action to appoint their officers. And I believe you have a chair and a vice chair. So it would be open for nominations for a chair.
I'd like to nominate Anita for chair,
I second that.
Third.
or
So there's a motion and a second. I think a vote would be appropriate at this time. So roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you all.
Okay, so the next order of business would be the appointment of a vice chair. Is there a nomination?
And nominate Jane.
Jane, do you
Second.
accept?
Yes.
Okay, so the nomination in the form of a motion,
Yes.
and is there a second?
From
Yes.
Dawn, or from Doug?
Okay, so now we're ready for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
That was easy.
Thank you.
thank you. That was easy. Thank you all. Okay, Nancy, do you have any items under LPA attorney items and reports?
No, I'm just happy to be here today with you. I know when we were first appointed, I got to sit with this board, and you guys are an awesome board, and thank you for all the work that you do preparing for the meetings, coming to the meetings, and making the difficult decisions.
Thank you, Nancy. Are you going to be here for our afternoon session as well?
I am. Becky will be here. We'll both be kind of monitoring.
Thank you.
Anita, I'd like to go back on my,
He has a
What
comment.
are you
my
going
no
back
comment.
I knew it.
I would have one item. I thought that most of the items I had
Let's
are gonna
just
be-
see if the board wants to allow you to do that. Does anyone have any objection to Mr. Vaness backtracking?
No.
All right, go
We're fine.
go
Yeah,
ahead,
I thought
Pat.
most of the items are going to be covered this afternoon, so I have to keep quiet about those. But
Go ahead.
One of the issues that came up, that we had made a recommendation to council to look at fees associated with variances. That came up at their meeting, and I'd like to offer my opinion about this. I think the discussion was, you know, if someone has a fence and the fence is $4,000 and it's costing $2,500 for the variance, is that fair? And I think that's a good point. And I think there was no clear discussion as to how to tackle these variances. And if I can maybe recommend a way to doing this, is if you have one permit for one house, and it's a non-conforming lot, and that said house creates the need for 3 variances when it comes to setbacks. That's, in my mind, that's one application. Even if you need a front, side setback, those are 2 separate variances, but they come about because of the need for
fence.
one house. If you have to ask for a fence setback and that creates 2 variances, it's one fence, it's one application. If you have to ask for a pool setback issue, that's an accessory use, that's a separate application. But if it's one building permit and it requires 3 variances due to that one house, it's the same review. The reviewer is gonna be looking at the entire property, they're gonna look at all setbacks. To me, that's one fee. So that's what I would recommend moving forward.
That would be
So
great.
as you all know by now, the infamous fence that's been debated is my fence. And and Kara, I hired Kara to actually do everything. And so my fence variance cost $2,800. The entire fence is $6,000. So almost half of the cost of the fence is in asking the town to be able to put it back, and now I have to apply for a permit for the fence. So there will be another cost associated with the fence. And it is a cumbersome process and a very expensive process. And I agree with you, Patrick, at a minimum. So in this case, had this been my fence, my cost would have only been $1,800 because it would have taken away 2 additional $500 variances. But still, $1,800 for a fence is the same cost that a variance would be for something much greater magnitude. It's, I think there's a step further that could be made there too, because I don't think that a variance for a fence is the same as asking for a variance for setbacks, or setbacks might not be a good thing. A height variance, for example, isn't the same as a variance for a fence. But it was complicated, and the other thing that I think would be good to do along this same line, I hope that the council will consider, is if they do change that fee schedule, making it retroactive to the date of the hurricane, because there are other people that are impacted by this. So, okay, that's it. Was my fence. all these months of talking about the mysterious fence. Anything else from anyone? Community development, Sarah, you have anything?
Yes, so we have had a request for a historic preservation board item. The Historic Preservation Board has not met for quite some time.
Yep.
Since well before Ian. Would the LPA I believe that the LPA essentially was the HPB. How would you like this to be handled? Do you want this to still be part of the boards that you create?
Sarah, can the local planning agency simply act as the Historic Preservation Board?
It depends on what your code says, as far as your duties and responsibilities. I don't know right offhand. It's
Jason, are
something
you
that I
jumping up
would
for this one?
Look into it. I would have to research it before I gave you an answer.
Because I know historically we have appointed a member of the LPA and then
Well, you
other
have two, you have
people.
two layers in historic preservation. So the LPA is the Historic Preservation Board by the LDC. You've also chosen to create a committee, Historic Preservation Advisory Board, to advise you on certain things. Now, that was kind of where we left off before Ian of what is their role, what are we looking for, are there any historic homes left to be saved? There was a fantastic job done with the comp plan years ago and making a list and where is that gone, that kind of catching up on that. That was going to be really their task. So I think what we're asking is kind of twofold. Is there a role that you want to assign and get that advisory committee together again? And then the second part to that is, your role as the board. We can bring things directly to you that come in. You've generally started with the advisory board for most of these things, but it's not in the code that it has to do that. It can come straight to you as a historic preservation board. I think, and even more importantly, is maybe meeting and figuring out what you want your objectives, goals and objectives to be as a board, especially with so much loss that we've had.
I think we need to start there. So-
Jason, if I recall, we were having trouble getting a quorum with the
Yeah.
advisory board, and we had talked about maybe reducing the number of seats.
Correct.
So I think maybe that's still an option, or if we can't fill those seats, just do away with it. Well, I would like to keep the advisory board there as an option, but not delay things. So if we don't have a quorum for the advisory board, bring it straight to us. We can make a decision.
Yeah, and I can foresee your advisory board maybe, I don't want to step outside of my boundaries here, but being your advisor on what are we going to do moving forward with codes and policies and preservation of historic structures, right? Moving through, we've had this storm, what's left and what can we protect? But the applications of designation by code, really, it's up to the Historic Preservation Board. You've used the advisory board as a tool for that before, but until that time, as they're maybe up and running, we could just bring those straight to you. But again, remember, I don't think you've ever, maybe I don't want to say ever, anytime I've been here, you've never had an application for something it's a recognition, not a designation.
Correct.
So you have these tiers that it's just basically a plaque recognizing the age and that it's something you want to celebrate, but it doesn't come with any good or bad that comes
Yeah.
with the preservation part of it and the designation part of it. I think we wish we would have done some more of those.
I think we wish we would have too, but
Maybe
they'd
that's
be
the
blown away
maybe that's the
nonetheless.
conversation to have moving forward.
So maybe for a future agenda, we could have this as a topic for the LPA and then decide where we go from there.
Yeah, we can add the Historic Preservation Board back on there, so you close as the LPA usually in the middle of it, open as the Historic Preservation Board, have your discussion about
Yeah.
what you want to do moving forward or any items that come up, and then usually close that and go back to the LPA stuff.
Okay,
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
Okay.
Sarah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Is there anything else from community development?
How much time do you want me to kill?
Thank you for,
No, we don't. have
thank you
anything.
all for the work you've done in preparation for this afternoon's meeting. Items for next month's agenda. Does anybody have anything they particularly have questions about or want to put forward? Sarah, do you have any input on what's coming up for next month?
So I believe that, the fire official has left, the fire special exception may be on your plate next month. They said special exception yesterday. So we're not clear on what exactly is coming forward yet, but something will be on your agenda next month for this.
Okay, so our meeting is scheduled for the 14th, is that correct?
I believe so.
That's the second Tuesday,
Yes.
Yeah.
okay? Does anybody look like they have any scheduling conflicts for that day? As we know, it's the week before Thanksgiving. Oh, I can't believe that.
I know.
Okay,
I should just mention, I won't be here physically, but I can join remotely.
but you'll be here in spirit.
Yes,
Okay.
I will
And
join
on by
remotely. I
phone.
will be in
All right.
California for a meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Dawn. Anything else? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment, please.
So move, Sennett.
Is there any objection to a motion to adjourn? We stand adjourned at 9:44 a.m.
That's a record.
We'll reconvene for our joint meeting with the town council at 11 a.m. Thank you all.
That's amazing.